I really just open up the questions, but I guess first off, it's great to be here. It's great to be with Coach Helfrich, the guys on the staff, both sides of the ball. I go a long way back with Don Pelham and Steve Greatwood, and John Neal and I coached together at Oregon State in 89 and 90. Known Mark and have a ton of respect for Coach Helfrich. Known him for about 15 years. So it's great to be here. We're excited to be here. And seems like we got a great group of kids. I don't know if we're football players yet. That's to be determined. But everything from the administrative staff all down has been great.
If you have a question, raise your hand. We'll bring the mic over there. We'll start with Jen in the front.
Why do you think Oregon's a good fit for you?
It's in talking to Mark and when we talked about this possibility, number one, we've been to the Northwest as a family for 6 years, so we understand the Northwest. When you've coached as long as at many places that I have, there's familiarity in a lot of the things that they stand for and they do. I think the integrity and the character of the guys on the staff, starting with our head football coach, is something that if I was going to get back in it, it was going to be with the right people. And so, in my opinion, it's been a great fit.
Ryan?
Brady, I think you touched on it with your past relationships with some of these guys, but was there any hesitation to take a job when the staff was kind of already set in place? You're not bringing in your own guys, and what's it like working with Don, who obviously had that job before?
Yeah, well, when this whole thing started in motion, Don called me, and we talked for about 45 minutes to an hour, and talked about being in this position. Talked about, how I perceive how we're going to work together, and it was right on point with what DP thought. And so it's really been a blessing. I'm glad he's here because, again, it's a guy I have a lot of trust in and have known for a long time. And it's really exciting because of the guys that we have on a staff as a whole, but the defensive staff, there's guys who have a lot of different experiences and some great experiences. So from that standpoint, it's been great.
Lindsay?
Brady, I don't know how much film you've watched yet, but I assume some at least.
Yeah.
What jumps out to you? Who do you think maybe is a football player? Is there anyone you're especially concerned about?
The one thing that I asked the guys who are on the staff, I don't want to know about anybody. I don't want any preconceived. I want to see it myself. I want to make those evaluations myself. Have I lost? I've watched the last 3 games. I know we lose some guys up front who are pretty good football players. You see guys running around, guys who will go hit. See guys not play perfect and sometimes not play with the effort that they can play with. But for me to judge and evaluate. And I never did as a head coach either. I mean, I didn't want to see film. I wanted to see what we did with them. And from a defensive standpoint of moving from one scheme to another, it's really not fair in some ways to judge guys up front when they're playing some 2-gap and then going to a 1-gap scheme. Does that answer your question?
Jerry?
Yeah, Coach. I assume one of the factors was the challenge, not being ranked fairly low in the country in defense. And, it's different if they were up on the top. I don't know if that would have made any difference in coming here. Is it the challenge that was part of the factor of you coming here to make something, to fix something?
You know what? The biggest thing is why I got into coaching is to help grow men. And, being associated with the media for a year with SiriusXM kept me very engaged. I feel like we're really close now because I did some media. But to be honest with you, I love coaching. I love working with kids and helping kids, and from socially to academically to competitively. It was a great opportunity to focus in on calling defense and coordinating the defense. And like Mark said, it's your defense. So having that opportunity was great, and we'll see how we do with it. I never thought about the other aspects of it, and I never have in coaching. I like being with the kids and helping them.
Chantel?
Brady, as you said, you were one of us last year, but
Yes, I was.
Yeah, you also got to watch some games just probably as sitting on your couch as a fan. What was that like for you for the first time in quite a while to just watch, not necessarily as a football coach or schematically or tactically, or did you still do that?
There's always games that you wanted to look at, teams, and being a defensive-minded person. I loved watching how Clemson played defense. And I had the opportunity to go down there because of XM radio and all that and spend the day with them. And, there's other teams that I could say that with. But, the game is when you've coached for 34 years or 33, whatever it is, it's party and you love the competition. And it really, from that standpoint, and part of it was work too, because you had to watch enough games so you could kind of have an idea what was going on. All the way in the back.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
Do you want me to take it away? Okay. The offense here, everyone knows how quickly we can score. How do you prepare for that? Have you had an offense before where you've had a quick tempo and your defense could be out there?
We were a little bit, with Denard, a little bit. But, in defending tempo, we've all done it enough, the different teams you play. Indiana goes about as quick as anybody really nationally in some ways. And so if you're asking from a coordinator standpoint, you prepare and you prepare. I'd like to play 22 guys on defense if we can, because the biggest thing is keeping guys fresh for the fourth quarter. And, it also, morale-wise, it helps. And the other part of it, you're getting guys the ability to get really reps in a game that they can learn from. But, look, our offense is dynamic. We want to be explosive defensively. And when I say that is that we want to be a defense that is going to dictate tempo to some degree, a defense that is going to be aggressive and chaotic, so that as we play these teams, they may have to slow down a little bit.
Guy in the back.
Going off Matt's question there, it's been widely publicized that we're switching to a 4-3 out here to go with what you do. How do you adapt or change that a little bit to kind of fit the quote Oregon way?
Well, number one, we've got to see what kind of personnel that we have. Starting in a 4-3 helps us in how we teach the package, because it will be carryover then when you get into the sub defenses, your nickels, your dimes, the different fronts that we want to be able to make it easy on the guys. And we've transitioned some guys to what we would call a rush end position, which is a little different. And we've got to see who we have. I talked about being explosive defensively. part of that is putting the guys in position who can make plays, in position to make plays. And so as we go through, a little bit of what we're doing from a standpoint with Coach Rad out there and watching guys move around and the agility part of it to playing football part of it during the spring.
Austin.
Brady, what did you learn from your time at Michigan? What did you learn about yourself or about the job? And even though you haven't been a coordinator before at this level, are you sort of looking forward to maybe a job that's a little bit more behind the scenes compared to your last one?
I've been very blessed to be at a lot of great schools and with a lot of great people. And this is another chapter of that. So, you always learn. I think you have to learn. From successful years, we were 12-1 or 12-0 at Ball State. We learned what we could have done better. Same thing at San Diego State, same thing at Michigan. So you always want to see what you can do better. And I've always coached a position as a head coach. And, this spring I'm going to evaluate, walk around a little bit more. But like I told the guys, I'm sure one day I'll be with DP with the backers. One day I'll be with Ron up front. One day I'll take the safeties and tell John, I get the safeties today and, whatever it might be. And sometime, obviously the fall, I will coach a position. I can't tell you which one. It's where I think I can be the most value.
Okay, we'll take Lindsay, Sky next.
Brady, and when you were contemplating taking this job and in the year off that you had, who were your kind of mentors, people that you talked to? What was the best piece of advice you got as you contemplated getting back into it?
I would say, my brother, he's a secondary coach at Tampa Bay, and he's coached a long time. As much as anybody, probably him. If my dad was still living, I would have talked to him about it. But from that standpoint, last spring I was here for a couple days. I was at TCU. I was at Tennessee. I went up to Corvallis, to see Gary and what they were doing. And then in August, was able to go to Clemson, Georgia, Florida State, and Ole Miss, and look at how they do things, and it was part of the job work-wise, but it was also, because I know in this business a long time, a lot of guys. So, there were things that I got to do and learn.
Back to Sky in the back.
Coach, not to knock you because you've had great success as a head coach, but Wade Phillips, who just won Super Bowl as a D coordinator with the Broncos, made a remark that he wasn't a very good head coach, but he's a great defensive coordinator. Do you feel like you can be a great defensive coordinator, and are you excited about just the opportunity of focusing on that?
Oh, yeah. To answer your question, that will be determined if I'm a great defensive coordinator. But to coach that side of the ball and from a mental preparation and perspective, it's awesome, and to do it with a bunch of great guys.
Matt?
You've had a couple stops, and everywhere you've gone, it seems like the defense picks things up relatively quickly, and you produce good defenses. What were those maybe early changes that you did at those stops, and does that kind of translate over to here?
Well, we'll find out if it translates, but, I believe there's a way you play defense, and from a physicalness, and you have to do that every day. It just doesn't happen on Saturdays, to the effort. Because if we're playing with great effort, all 11, and we don't step with the right foot from a technique standpoint or fundamentally, but if we're playing like our hair's on fire, we're going to be okay. But, it all starts with what kind of competitive nature that we have as players, as coaches, and how we go about every day getting better than we were the day before. And that's the details that we'll constantly look for in ourselves and in our players.
Mike, in the back.
I know you said a moment ago that you want to evaluate the players on your own. You want to see them for yourselves. How much time have you been able to spend with any of the players, any of the other coaches on staff, sort of settling in and getting used to sort of way of life around here?
Well, I don't know if I got to get used to a way of life. I mean, I've always been a guy who this has always been an obsession, if that's the right thing, because I've got to prepare myself and we've got to prepare ourselves so the expectations that the players have, that every day we're going to give them those expectations. And at the same time, there's expectations we're going to have as a defensive staff of the kids who are playing defense. I watched TCU, I watched the Beavers, and I watched the USC game. And those are the three games at this point I've watched. I think I mentioned before, I asked the guys not to tell me about any of them, any of the players. I've met with every player on defense but two guys individually. We met as a defensive team last Friday and kind of went through the expectations on a daily basis and how we're going to play. We're starting to get in a little bit of the X's and O's with them through, huddle and the things that you can do that way legally. But no, it's I don't know if I'm answering your question at all, but it's really an exciting group of guys to be around.
Time for a couple more questions. Jerry.
Similar to the last one, but a little more specific.
Good, because I may not have answered his, so we'll try it now.
We were thinking on the same lines, I guess. But you're talking about you came here for relationships with young men is why you're here, right? So have you got feedback from them in the interaction? Do you feel like they're excited, they've embraced you, or they kind of, what kind of feedback have you got?
Well, we met individually. No, not one of them said they didn't like me. So
no, but
yet. But no, I think because of how the transition and the guys on the staff have handled the transition, the kids have been excited. They seem, some of them are, okay, now you're moving me here, and once in a while you always have to address the whys, and especially in this generation. Why are you doing it? Well, because this gives you a better chance to make plays. And if it gives you a better chance to make plays, then we're going to be better as a team because of that.
Matt.
Two-part question. You've always been known to be a good recruiter. What drives you in that aspect? And then what are maybe the challenges and the strengths that this program presents for you specifically for recruiting?
Well, I think this is a national brand. And you look at the roster on this football team, it is a national brand. And from an academic standpoint, what Oregon has done over the last, 10 years, 11 years. Obviously, the Nike stuff's cool, right? But from the standpoint of recruiting's competition, right? I like competition. So it's another thing that feeds you if you want to be the best at it in relationships with people.
Brady, this conference is known for some high-octane offenses.
Mm-hmm.
Some D coordinators have said that the days of holding teams to 10 points is a thing of the past. Do you believe that when you look at this, that you got to hold teams to 20-ish?
Well, I think it used to be one of the goals from a defensive standpoint was 13 points or less. That was kind of the standard that everybody had. I think the style of offenses obviously have changed. And you can also see defenses evolving for the style of offense. You do look at, if you're going to play Stanford, okay, your team goals for that week may be a little different defensively because of the style of offense. When you're going to play Arizona, your maybe points per possession becomes bigger than your holding Christian McCaffrey under 100 yards rushing. So, you have to be realistic for your players, because if you set unrealistic goals, now we want challenging goals, but unrealistic goals, that's not fair to those kids. But, you look at the Big 12. I mean, and throughout the country, people, the spread and all that, but you see defenses changing and adapting. But the game of football still comes down to blocking and tackling, right? And tackling has a lot to do with support systems, how you're going to support it, who's the cutback player, who's the force player, who's the chase contain player, who's the plug safety. All those things are things that we have to do well and we have to teach well.
Last question. Tyson?
In watching the limited amount of film you were able to watch, those final 3 games or whatever it was, were you able to pick up on what you kind of thought the glaring flaw was, or what kind of you could come in and fix, and why do you kind of think that you were the person for that?
No, not really. I mean, when I watched it, I'm watching, effort. I was sitting there with who is that guy? Okay, that's number 8. Whatever it might be, and as much as anything, you're watching. My eyes usually go to the front first, because I believe that's where the game is played. And also, by trade, I've been a defensive line coach, even though I've coached every position most of my career, how we play up front, because that definitely will determine how we play as a defense. Hey, thanks.